Hello fellow orchid lovers, it's Danielle here with a Care Collab video about my Phalaenopsis schillerianna. So my friend Nina from Ninja Orchids came up with the very fantastic idea to post a series of videos where other growers could join in and show how they grow the same orchid in their environment. So this is my Phalaenopsis schillerianna. I will link the other channels that are posting videos about their schilleriannas in the description so you can check out how they grow the same orchid in their environment. So as many of you know, this particular plant grows typically in the Philippines. Now I live in the United States, more specifically in upstate New York, which is very different from the Philippines. So although this plant has certain light, temperature, and humidity requirements, that is not something that is naturally found in my environment, and so I have to create it for her. So those who are subscribed know that I grow in water culture. Those who clicked on this video because of the hashtag and found my channel that way, welcome, and I grow in water culture. So I've been growing in water culture for approximately 4 years. This plant in specific, I have had for approximately 3 years, just under 3 years. So I got this plant as a seedling. I did not anticipate getting a seedling. When I purchased it, I did not expect to get the plant that I got. It was a little disappointing because it was very young and in quite pitiful shape, actually. It had 2 very thin leaves. It had a new leaf growing and a very, very poor root system. So I was not exactly thrilled with the plant that I got, but you know, we've moved past that. It's now been almost 3 years, and as you can see, she is blooming for me. So she has thrived in this environment. So what is my environment? I grow in a spare room in my house. As I said, I live in New York. It's currently snowing outside, so growing outside is not really an option for me. Growing in a greenhouse is not really an option for me, and so I took one of my spare bedrooms and turned half of it into a grow room where I grow just over 200 plants, I think is where the number that I'm at. So I kind of have to keep my conditions intermediate to accommodate for all the different types of orchids that I grow in this room. So as far as temperatures are concerned, I try to keep the temperature no lower than 55 degrees Fahrenheit and no higher than 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So I do have, supplemental heat. I do have an AC that I hook up in the summer for those really hot days. And then I also like to keep the humidity somewhere around 50%. So I do have some humidifiers that I do run in the room to keep it at that humidity. I try not to keep it too much higher than 50% because it is a bedroom. So I don't want it to be too damp in here because I don't want any mold to grow or anything like that since it is my home. As far as water is concerned, like I said, I do grow in water culture. I have found that this particular Phalaenopsis is a very thirsty plant. So whereas my hybrid Phalaenopsis, I can do a semi-water culture where I take the orchid and I give it water and then I take the water away and they're dry for a couple of days, she doesn't really appreciate that. So she is in what's called full water culture, which means that her roots are always in a reservoir of water. The reservoir is not very high typically, but she always has water available to her. Now once a week, I do raise the water level all the way up to give her a nice big drink. Let it sit like that for 24 to 48 hours, and then I drop the level back down. My water is always fertilized. I do believe in giving them a very weak solution on a regular basis. So I don't give the recommended amount that you're going to typically find on your fertilizer containers. Typically, fertilizers companies do encourage you to give like once a month a real big boost of fertilizer, but I don't subscribe to that. I typically try to keep my fertilizer level below 100 ppm. And that seems to work well for my plants. 2 things that I've noticed about this particular type of Phalaenopsis is one, has to do with the roots. So the roots are really, really cool, actually. They are not like your typical hybrid Phalaenopsis roots. Your hybrid Phalaenopsis roots are more cylindrical and smoother. The Phalaenopsis, the schillerianna, her roots are more flat and they're very rough, almost like sandpaper, which unfortunately is the perfect environment for algae. And she does not like algae. So it's something that I find I have to keep up with to keep her root system healthy. If I don't keep up with it and a root becomes inundated with algae, she will dump that root. That root will start to rot. So I make sure that every week when I change the water, I clean out her vase really well, and I try to rinse off her roots. Once a month, I try to take a toothbrush and just kind of scrub at her roots. Now, this might be a little more labor intensive than some people might care to do. I consider it a labor of love to keep her happy. Ways that you can avoid algae buildup, even if you're not growing in water culture, media does tend to build up algae. One way that you could do that is making sure that your exterior pot is either opaque or a dark pot that doesn't let light in, or you can put something around your glass if you do grow in water culture to cut down on that light level so the algae won't grow as quickly. Personally, I enjoy seeing her roots, so scrubbing the roots once a month with a toothbrush is something I'm willing to do to keep those roots visible. Now, as far as light levels are concerned, she does like a little more light than my hybrid Phalaenopsis. So my hybrid Phalaenopsis are kept on these shelves, and they are not in a window. They do have supplementary grow lights, but they are not in a window, whereas she lives over here in this window. Now, like I said, it is snowing outside, so it is kind of a dull day. So there's not a ton of light coming through the window, but as you can see, it is a lot brighter than the other section where I keep my hybrids. She is typically on this shelf with some of my more light-loving Phalaenopsis, and she really seems to enjoy a much higher level of bright light, not direct light. It is filtered through that curtain, but bright light. She does enjoy that. And then I also have a light strip there for these dull days so that she can get a little extra light. As you can see, the humidity level is at 62. I was running my humidifiers to try to get the level up because I was in and out of this room dumping some of my other phals. So that humidity level is a little higher than I typically let it get in here. All right, so I think we covered most of the care requirements as far as that's concerned. Now, as you see, she is in spike. I've had her for 3 years. So if you have a seedling, that's approximately how long it took me to get my seedling to spike for me. The schillerianna is one of those Phalaenopsis that does need a difference in temperature to trigger that spike. And what I mean by that is she does need a cool down, not a cold, but cool. So she needs a change in the temperature to be significantly lower at night in order for that spike to trigger. So like I said, typically I don't let it get below 55 degrees in here, but during the day, as you can see, which I'll bring you back over to my temperature, it's around 64 degrees. And the lowest it'll get is around 55. So that's a 10-degree temperature difference. And that's the kind of difference I'm talking about in order to get the Phalaenopsis schillerianna to spike. A lot of hybrids, they don't necessarily need that drastic of a drop, but this is the first time that she has spiked for me, and that is the type of drop that I gave her. I don't know if it's just that she's mature enough now to spike or if it was that temperature difference, but I do know that the Phalaenopsis schillerianna does need that colder temperature to trigger that spike. As far as what that exact colder temperature needs to be, it's probably different in everyone's environment, but that's what I did in my environment, and as you can see, she did develop a spike. Now, this spike is actually a lot more extensive than I expected for a first-time spike. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very grateful that she chose to give me so many blooms. I love the plant for what it is. I love those leaves. I am a sucker for a mottled leaf orchid. So to me, even if she didn't spike, I love this plant. But obviously these blooms are beautiful. It is not the orchid that I thought I was going to get. This bloom is slightly different. It's a little more pink. I was expecting to get the one that has the the whiter leaves with the speckles on them. But this is fine. This is really pretty. Again, I did not get her for blooms, so it really doesn't matter to me. I really wanted her for her foliage. The only disappointment with her blooms is that they are not fragrant. Schillerianna can be a fragrant Phalaenopsis. Unfortunately, it seems that the variety that I have is not fragrant. Now, again, this is her first spike, so it may be that her next spike will develop that fragrance, but probably not. But that's okay. Like I said, I really just enjoy her for her foliage. So that is in general what I do with my Phalaenopsis schillerianna. Again, I live in a very cold climate, so I had to kind of replicate inside along with a bunch of other different types of orchids, an intermediate level of care to try to make her happy. I do give her brighter light than I give my hybrids. She seems to enjoy that, and she also does not like to dry out. And again, she does not care for algae. So if you do have a Phalaenopsis schillerianna and her roots seem like they're not thriving very well, those things might be something you might want to keep in mind. The fact that she is a little more thirsty than your typical hybrid Phalaenopsis, and that if she does have algae on her roots, that might be one of the reasons why she is unhappy. So I hope that that video was helpful to you. Welcome to everyone who this is your first video of mine that you've seen, and thank you to all of my subscribers for continuing to watch my videos. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you all next time.